Hi, Meg.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Good. So tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from North Carolina. I was recently, for the past probably 10 years, between Boston and New Jersey, but just moved down to North Carolina for some warmer weather, and that's where I grew up too. So,
I don't blame you. I've always lived in like sort of cold weather and I don't know
yeah,
why because I
yeah.
always regret it in the winter. I'm like, why am I still here?
There's a beauty to like the coziness that you can get from cold weather, but I totally agree. Sunshine is like where I'm meant to be.
Yes. And it's like it's good for a month maybe. And then I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, the other 4 or 5 months of winter is just not fun anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
After the holidays, I'm like, I'm over it. I'm over it.
You need the snow for the holidays, and then it's like back to back to actually wanting something nice.
So what's like the temperature there now?
So it's been a little bit up and down, but like yesterday's it was like 60s. Today I think it's a little bit more in like the 50s.
Okay.
So, I can still wear a cute jacket, but I don't need to get out the snow boots.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
So what do you do for fun?
Yeah, I for fun, I'm just like a big exercise person. And I don't mean that in like all I do is exercise, but like I love going for walks and I love going for hikes and we love like playing pickleball and we love like just like getting out there and being active and doing that kind of stuff. So definitely warmer weather allows, and when I say we, I mean my husband and I, allows us to kind of enjoy those things that we do like to do a lot more.
Yeah, and it helps with our diabetes as well.
So much, so much.
What do you do for work?
So I work, I'm actually a diabetes health coach. So I work with people who have type 1 and just like helping create really healthy habits, with things like movement and exercise, but also through nutrition. I'm currently on my way to become a registered dietitian. So I've got about 6 months left in that certification, but I finished my master's in nutrition and food science last year. So really just like I was diagnosed 25 years ago, and for the past 5 years is the first time I've really like stepped into my diagnosis and really like tried to understand it. And now I want to spread that knowledge and just understanding how holistic diabetes is with everyone I know because I think it just can make life so much better living with type 1.
Oh my gosh, nutrition is such a big part of it, and you don't learn that when you're diagnosed with
Uh, it's
diabetes.
like, here's how you count, this is how you count carbs, and there you go.
I'm like, well, carbs, they're all different. So let's
Yep,
start
yep,
there. Not as
exactly.
simple as counting carbs, unfortunately. So you were diagnosed 25 years ago. So how old were you at the time?
I was 5, so I'm 30. Well, I'm 29. I'm almost 30. I'm
Oh.
calling it 30 now.
Oh, hey, I'm over the 30 mark already, and I would say it's been better than
I'm
20.
excited. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of people dread it. Like, I think, especially, like, I'm get deep here for a second, but I think living with a disease like diabetes, you really learn to take every day for a gift and like for what it is. Like, there's so many challenges that we faced and like so many things that could have gone wrong that fortunately didn't. And, you know, I'm happy to be 30. I think it's awesome and that I've been able to live this long with such a crazy disease, as we'll put
Yes.
it.
Yes. And you're just like, I feel like your 20s, no one knows what's going on in your 20s. You're just
Oh
like
my
trying to
God,
figure
yeah.
out life at that point. Like at least
Uh-huh.
30s, you kind of know what's going on.
A little more direction for
Yeah.
sure.
So do you remember your diagnosis story at all or from your parents or?
Yeah, so I have like little snippets of my mind, and I don't know if they were true memories or if it's something I've created or just heard. So I would say I remember my dad has type 1. So I do remember I had to like pee or wet my bed 3 times in the middle of the night. So I had to wake up my parents 3 times and be like, I wet my bed. And I remember being so nervous to be like on the third time. I was like, they're going to think I'm the worst child ever. I just wet the bed 3 times in a row when I'm 5 years old. This shouldn't be happening. And my parents were like so nice about it because I think they were like, we think something's going on here. And because my dad had type 1, they had a meter. So I do remember checking my blood sugar in my room. Like I was already on the floor because like I had wet the bed twice. So I was like laying on the floor. and then being like, oh, we have to get in the car. And they were being so nice to me. And I was like, I just wet the bed. Like, why are they, it's the middle of the night. What's happening? And then, I had it was obviously type 1. And I do remember in the hospital feeling like I had to, this is such a silly story, but my mom had gotten a sandwich from the cafeteria and I hated crust at that age. I thought it was like the worst part. It was so gross. But my mom was always like, it's healthy. You have to eat it. It's good for you. And I remember like my mom bringing me a tuna fish sandwich from the cafeteria, being like, here, Megan. And I remember thinking to myself, I've got to eat this crust now. I've got to get healthy, which I know is such a small story, but I think it really shows kind of the responsibility that you have to take on at that age. Like you can't choose to be a kid and, well, I didn't have to eat that crust. That's like an insignificant thing. It's just that mental switch of like, oh, I've got to take care of this now. Like it's not just fun and games, like life is serious now. So yeah, that's what I remember. And also giving a shot to an orange. But beyond that, it's pretty fuzzy.
Oh gosh. And at age 5, it's like no kid should have to even worry about that. It's so
No.
unfortunate, but
Yeah.
like you grow up really fast when you have diabetes at that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the interesting thing too, like I talk to so many people who have been diagnosed young or old. And it's funny, the people who are diagnosed as kids, myself included, typically, I know this isn't everyone's story, but typically are like, oh, I'm so glad I was diagnosed young. I don't know life without it. And I feel that way too. I'm like, I can't imagine. I hear when people are diagnosed older, it's like you have to relearn how to live your life. This is all I've ever known. Like to me, I'm like, it's just what it is.
Mhm.
Whereas I think the mental burden, and obviously I don't know for sure because I wasn't diagnosed older, but I think it would be just, they're both very sad, but it's just a different life switch.
It's true. I was diagnosed at 29 and
Okay.
the
Yeah.
first year was brutal for me. I didn't know, I didn't know anything. So I'm just learning it all. And I even
Mhm.
like it's weird though, because so it's only been 3 years for me, but I don't
Mhm.
even remember what it's like to eat freely. And it's only
Yeah.
been 3 years. So I'm like, it's just life
Yeah.
changes so fast. And you're like, wow, I don't even remember what it's like to eat pizza and just like not have to worry about it. But
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah. So how old was your dad when he was diagnosed?
He was 28. So he had a late diagnosis too, which is really interesting. And, I have two brothers, neither of them have it. My mom has some autoimmune diseases. So I think, I have celiac too, and she does too. So I think I just got a nice mix of genes in there. But yeah, I'm the only kid in my family that has it,
Okay.
fortunately.
I've heard that actually that both parents have to have an autoimmune gene for your kid to get
Mhm.
one. I don't know if that's actually true, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not sure about that one. I don't know if it's not or true, but the one thing I do know is that you're more likely to get it from your dad than your mom if
Mm,
your mom has it,
yes.
which I think me learning that for so long, I was like, I don't know about kids. Maybe I'll adopt. Like, I didn't want to pass it on. It felt really, I don't know. We won't get into that here. That gets all dark. But I think when I learned that fact for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, like I think it's like a woman with type 1 having kids. It's a really similar chance to someone without type 1
Hmm.
having a type 1
Yeah.
child, which
Hmm.
for me was like one of the most freeing facts I ever learned.
Yes, I agree. I mean, it's weird how it works that way. I don't really get it, but it is nice to know for sure. Especially because with women, like all the crap you have to go through with pregnancy as a type 1, it's like we shouldn't
Mhm.
have to deal with that.
I know. Oh my gosh. I watch so many women. I'm still a few years away. I definitely want kids, but I
Uh-huh.
have some time. I have some things to do first. But I know I follow a lot of women who are pregnant just to like learn about it and start to immerse myself in that world. And my gosh, it's so amazing how they're able to, it's just that next level of control that you're looking to get just to, help with everything. So props to everyone who's listening who has gone through that type 1 pregnancy. I applaud you and hope to be like you, but it's rough.
Well, it's funny too because they tell you, like I've interviewed a few people who have had children, and they
Mhm.
say that they tell you to eat like at least 100 grams of carbs a day, but
Mhm.
you have to stay under 140. And everyone's like, well, that's kind of like a this or that situation.
For sure. Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. So how do you manage your type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so I wear a Omnipod 5 and Dexcom G6. In terms of like how I management, I really have made an effort in all of my life to live my life first and find a way to make diabetes work within it. So
Mhm.
if there's something I want to do, if I want to run a marathon, if I want to travel, I've traveled to India, to Ireland. I lived in Ireland for a bit. It's like life first, we'll
Mhm.
figure out the diabetes stuff second. I truly believe there's a way to eat everything, to do everything with diabetes within reason, staying in range. You know, there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be things that go up and down. But in terms of like how I manage it, there's no specific diet that I eat, there's no specific anything. It's just figuring out how I want to live my life and then figuring out the tools and strategies I need to adapt my diabetes to be able to do that.
That's great. I love that because a lot of times it is the opposite, which is unfortunate. We shouldn't have to live that way. We should live the way that you're living.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. Do you like the Omnipod 5?
I love it. I think it's been one of the biggest. I had a pretty great A1C and time in range going into it. So I can't say that it's had a big difference there. It's pretty much stayed the same, but it's the biggest step back I've had to take from thinking about diabetes day in and day out. You know, just because like the basals are
Mhm.
automated. So you don't have to think about like, oh, I'm going into my period. Like, do I need to increase or do I need to, there's just like that much less that you have to do. And there's still little things like if I am going into my period, I give a little bit more of my
Mhm.
bolus insulin, but it's just so much more hands off. And so I've really enjoyed my time on it.
What were you on before?
I was on the dash. So I went from Omnipod Dash to Omnipod 5.
Okay, because Omnipod 5 is automatic.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it
yes.
has that hybrid closed loop or hybrid loop.
So because I'm on MDI, so I'm like, I always have
Okay.
questions. So
Yeah.
I've heard some people complain about the Omnipod, like it doesn't catch the highs as quickly as some people would like.
Mhm.
Why is that?
Yeah. So Omnipod 5, and I think this is confusing for some people, it doesn't have an auto bolus feature like the T Slim does. So if I go high, I'm going to give myself a correction. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'll just wait for the basal to bring it down. But if you think about basal is such a small amount of insulin. Yes, that basal is increasing if your blood sugar is going up on the Omnipod 5, but it's not getting fast enough to bring it down. So you're still manually doing those correction boluses, whereas it's just automating like in between those meals overnight,
Mm.
if you put on activity mode and go exercise. So that's where I think it can be frustrating. And there's a lot of studies that show that your insulin to carb ratio has to strengthen by a lot going onto a looping system. And I think a lot of people they underestimate how much they have to strengthen their insulin to carb ratio by, but that can make a really big difference just because there's more bolus insulin in the algorithm than if you're doing MDI or if you're on a traditional non-closed loop pump.
Okay, so when you say strengthen, you mean people just need to know what their insulin to carb ratio.
Yeah, so by strengthen, like insulin to carb ratio, if it's stronger, it's more insulin per carb.
Okay, yeah.
So the number gets smaller, the ratio number gets smaller, but the
Okay,
amount of insulin gets bigger.
interesting. Why
So
is that?
like my boluses, yeah, so it's because your basals are more accurate, because your basal is more accurate. So it's typically smaller. Typically on MDI, you're a little bit above maybe what that basal might be. So when you're on a hybrid loop system like Omnipod 5, you are getting less basal and more bolus because when you give a bolus, it's going to pause that basal underneath after that bolus. So there needs to be more bolus insulin to compensate for the lack of basal underneath it.
Okay.
And overall, those basals are more accurate. So, like for example, when I was on Omnipod Dash, when I was manually inputting those basals, I had, a certain amount of basal every day, and that didn't like really fluctuate from day to day. So it was typically a little bit more aggressive than maybe I needed.
Mhm.
So some of that bolus insulin, it didn't need to be as high because some of that underlying basal compensated for it. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, like the bolus basal split is just changing because it's able to automate it better. So you're not needing as much
Okay.
basal, but because you still need that total daily insulin to be, relatively what keeps you in range, there needs to be more bolus.
So in the Omnipod 5, you can set your own range though. Like you can say like I don't want to go above 140.
Hmm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then once you start to go over 140, but you would still have to do your manual correction if you wanted to.
Yeah. So it'll eventually bring you back down. Like if you were at 140, and let's not use 140 because that one it would bring down pretty fast. But like if you were 200, it's eventually going to bring you down. It's just going to take a lot longer than if you just give that correction bolus.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I did think it was automatic when they were
Yeah.
talking
Well,
about.
it is automatic with the basal, it's just not
Yeah.
with the bolus.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, like I know some people would prefer to have that like automatic bolus. I actually don't because there are some times when I'm at like 140 and I know I'm headed into a workout and I don't want it to have a bolus because I don't want all this insulin on board. So I think it still automates what I like to be automated, but it also gives me the opportunity to still, if maybe I didn't want to put on activity mode, but I knew I was doing like a Pilates workout or something. I know I'm not going to crash low because my pump was like giving me all this insulin in the background.
Right. Okay. So then activity mode, it cuts out the basal.
Yeah, essentially it lowers it or cuts it out depending on where you are.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I just had like a doctor's appointment with my endocrinologist, and
Yeah.
she wants me to go on tandem, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
They both have their benefits. They both have their benefits. I think for me and like being active and like loving just like moving and
Yes.
always like up for a walk or up for a whatever, I feel like Omnipod 5 is like the one for activity, especially with like no tubes and everything like that.
Right. Yes. So speaking of activity, you ran the New York City Marathon this year.
Mhm.
How'd it go?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I think about that day and I'm still on cloud nine. The training, I'll admit, was probably the worst training I've ever done for a marathon. So I was very nervous. I told myself I was retired after I did an ultra marathon like 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
Okay.
I'm never running long distance again. And then this opportunity came up, and I was like, well, we'll just do this. So I was severely undertrained going into it, but I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have a great time. I'm just going to like run my race. And the energy in New York City is just amazing. It is just, it was unreal, like running through those streets, just like lined with so many people. And blood sugar wise, I was able to like keep it in range the whole time, which is no easy feat, but easier than I thought it would be.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's amazing. How was, I have to ask, because I ran,
Yeah.
what was it, last year? 2020.
Oh, amazing.
How was getting to the start line? Was it fine? Like the pre stuff?
Yeah. Did you take the ferry?
I did last year and I got stuck at the bus. I don't know if you heard that story for like 3 hours. I was stuck waiting for a bus last year.
Oh, I did what they said not to do, and I just took an Uber to
Oh,
the store.
no, that's
I
actually
stayed
probably
in
scary.
Jersey City. Yeah. I stayed in Jersey City and I just took an Uber there because I was like, I'm not dealing with anything public transport. I didn't, especially I'm going to use diabetes as an excuse, but it was really just me being like a little snobby. I was like, I don't want to have to wait in a line. I'm stressed enough. I don't want to have to like line up, be like corralled in with people, not have, a bathroom or low snacks or anything. So I took a 20-minute Uber,
Good for you.
got dropped off at the security thing at Staten Island and just walked right in.
Oh, good for you. I'm glad you had a better experience than I did. It's funny you said that though, because diabetes is an excuse sometimes, because I even think, and it's so weird because like I never want to be considered different than anybody, but at the same time, I'm like, they should let us go up in the front because we have to
Mhm.
manage. Like I didn't start till 11, and I'm like, you know how much goes on before that? Like I hate to say like it's not fair, but it also kind of is not. I'm like, we have a lot more to deal with than the average human.
Yeah. And I felt that way too, because so many of my long runs I did, and when I say so many, I mean the 4 that I did do. Out of like the 8 I was meant to do. The 4 long runs I did, I always do them at like the crack of dawn because I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, gotta get this over with. Just gonna finish it. Whereas on that day, I think I started at like 10 o'clock and I was like, I'm gonna do my best. This will be fine. But it was rough.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just, yeah, my opinion, but
Yeah.
anyway. Well, that's good. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So, what do you think type 1 diabetes will be like in 10 years?
Oh my gosh. I would say I'm not great at predicting technology, but I think there's going to be automation that is more programmable to like inputs of the person, if that makes sense. Like I was talking about with like the Omnipod 5, it's like if I know I want to work out in like 3 hours, so I don't want to give myself a full correction here. I think there's going to be more ways to kind of like alert things of what you're going to do, what your plans are, what you're planning to eat to kind of support that. Because I feel like that's the one thing right now that technology and stuff isn't always, it's always playing catch up. And I feel like the technology of the future is going to be a little bit more predictive and foresight
Yeah.
oriented. But also I hope insulin gets faster to work. Like I love, I haven't used Afrezza, but I think it's so fascinating that there's like insulins on the market now that can be start working super fast, which is so cool. And hopefully, I'm going to say I hope there's a cure, but I've been saying that for 25 years. So it feels a little wishful thinking for me.
Yes, even for the cure, it's like even if that comes about, it's going to be so
And
much
then,
money that
yeah.
like most of us probably can't afford it anyway. So I try not to even like think about it. I'm like, oh, whatever.
Well, and the other thing is, of the like, little pieces of cure news that we've received over the past few years, it's like your immunosuppressant still, like there's still this like quality of life
Mm.
that is taken away. And I feel like my quality of life with diabetes right now isn't that bad. Like I know it can be a lot worse, and I'm privileged in saying that because I do have this tech and everything, but I'm like, I can live my life, I can figure things out. Whereas if I had to like not go on an airplane because I might get the flu, like that would really hurt my life more than what diabetes does now. So it's all a trade-off.
Yeah. And that was super interesting what you said about the like planning like your future day almost with the pumps. Someone else I interviewed brought that up and she was like, someone should
Oh,
figure out
really?
how like you would obviously have to keep your calendar very like tight, but she was like, if the pump would almost like tie with your calendar and it would say like, oh, at
Yes.
5 p.m. you're doing a workout. So we're gonna like, I'm like, that would be really cool. But you would have to have a very like on spot calendar. But
That's so funny. Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one that thinks that because I always am like, I wish I could tell the pump, like, hey, I'm gonna work out at 4 p.m. Like, start me on active, start reducing my basal at 3:30. Or like, I have a presentation at noon. Can you give me a little extra insulin right before? Because I'm not going to be thinking about that. Like that kind of automation could be so cool. But obviously, if you weren't up to date, it could be a little dangerous.
yes.
But yeah, if it could read your mind, that would be like ideal.
I think that's just like a real pancreas. But
Yeah.
do you have any tips for someone recently diagnosed with type 1?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is first and foremost, join a community like of people that you genuinely like enjoy being around, and like lean into that community and learn from, yes, your doctors, like they're very smart, they went to school, they know stuff, but also like you can learn so much from other people that have had it and get just so much extra knowledge. And I think that that's really amazing, both mentally, stuff about diagnosis, stuff about how to prep for an endo appointment, what pumps to look at, all this stuff. So I think isolation when you're first diagnosed is one of the worst things because you feel like you're truly going through this alone, but there's so many other people who are going through it, who have gone through it, who want to help, who want to support. So community is my number one always.
Yes, I totally agree. And like you said, it's like most of it is lifestyle, honestly, like learning how to live with type 1 diabetes in a lifestyle form. So,
Yeah, like there's this mentality sometimes, and I think everyone drops into this. Like, I'd be lying if I said that I didn't sometimes, but I call it like why me syndrome. And it's like, why do I have to do this? Like, why doesn't, why me? Like, and it feels really isolating and alone. And I think the best way to snap out of that is to have people around you being like, oh yeah, I had to do that too. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Like, oh yeah, I had a low on a date the other day too. Like it's just having people that can like validate how you felt and what you went through. It just makes the world of a difference and makes living with it feel not so isolating. That's the worst place to be.
it's true when you're around people that have working pancreases. Sometimes you're like, oh, like, not that there's obviously like you should still have friends that do, but it is a lot nicer when
Yeah.
someone else is going through the same thing as you.
Well, it's even like, I mean, my best friends are not type 1, but like when we go sometimes to, trips and stuff, like I remember one time and they're great about it. Like if I need something, they'll do it. But we were walking and I was going low and I was like, hey guys, like I'm going low. Can we hang on a bit? And they were like, oh, it's just like another 10 minutes. Will you be? And I was like, they care because they're like, there's food there. Like it'll be fine. But if
Mhm.
I was with someone who was with type 1, they'd be like, oh my God, let's sit. I have starburst.
Right.
It's like a totally different dynamic of understanding that even if someone was well trained on your disease or understood it, like they are still going to forget or not fully understand the trouble that comes with it.
Right. And you can't really blame them for it, but it is extremely
Oh,
frustrating when
yeah.
those things happen. So,
Yeah. Just like my friends are going through stuff that I'll never understand. Like this is kind of the thing that you need your type 1 people to vent to open up to, you know, one of my good friends lives in where I recently moved to Charlotte and she lives here too. And I was so excited because like when we go out to bars together, it's so fun because like she'll have a juice box if I need one, or like we'll be like, how many carbs should we bolus for this cocktail? Like it's so fun because you're able to like connect in this way that maybe you can't with like I want to ask one of my friends like how many carbs do you think is in this margarita? They'd be like, I don't know.
yeah. I don't know. I don't care. It's what they're
Yeah.
thinking. Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Yeah, I loved getting a chance to talk to you.
Have a good day.
You too.